Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Chavches, Ram Chav Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Vayotzim min ha'etz, any type of fiber or material that comes directly from the tree, Einu mitam tumas ohalim, cannot become tamei with tumas ohalim, elo pishton, unless it is flax. Now, what exactly is tumas ohalim? Explains Rashi. If one forms a tent out of material, and inside that tent there is a mace, a dead person, the Torah teaches us that even the oil becomes tamei, a very stringent form of tumah, and requires the hazah, the sprinkling of the ephah paraduma. The Mishnah teaches us that any fabric which is taken directly from the tree and is formed into a tent will not have this tumas ohalim unless it is made of flax of pishtan. Continues the Gemara Minolan. How do we know this concept? Omer Belazer, Gomar oil mi Mishkan. We learn it from Exeris Shava with the words oil from Mishkan. Now we know that in the Mishkan there was a tent. The krushim, the wooden beams, were covered with a tent with actually three levels of coverings. So level number 1 consisted of a covering, a spread made of tzemer pishtim, wool and linen. Level number 2 were the goat's hair, and then on top of that there were the oiros, the hides of the elim adamim, of the rams, and of the tachash, this unique type of creature the Gemara will discuss later. So the Mishkan had 3 layers, 3 levels of coverings. So just as we find in the Mishkan that there was the concept of oil, which comprised of these type of materials, we learn from there that any time we want to have a tumas ohalim, it needs to have the same type of material as the oil in the Mishkan. Again, Gamar oil in Mishkan, we learn from Exeris Shava, from Mishkan over to the halacha of tumas ohalim. What is Exeris Shava? Ksiv hacha, because by us, in the parsha of tumas ohalim, the Torah says, Zois ha-Torah, Adam kiyamos be'oil. So there's a mace in the oil. So we learn with Exeris Shava that just as in the Mishkan, the word oil was strictly if it contained a certain type of materials. Therefore, the oil over here in this pasuk regarding tumas ohalim needs also to contain those type of materials. It needs to be made of that type of material. Ksiv hacha by us it says Zois ha-Torah adam kiyamos be'oil. Uksiv hasam by the Mishkan it says Vayifra, he says oil ala Mishkan, he spread the tent over the Mishkan. Mala halan, just like over there, shal pishtan kori oil. So regarding the first layer, the first covering, which was a spread of tzemer pishtan, just like we find over there that pishtan is called the oil, and we don't find any other yotzim min ha'etz that is called the oil. Something coming from a tree should be considered an oil only pishtan. Afkan shal pishtan kari oil. Therefore, by us as well, with regard to tumas ohalim, the definition of oil will only apply to if it's an oil made of something coming from a tree, it needs to be pishtan. As unfortunately point out, just like in the Mishkan, there were many different types of spreads. We said there was layer number 1, which had the tzemer pishtim, layer number 2, which was the goat's hair, and above that were the hides. So the unfortunate point out that all those materials indeed are suitable for tumas ohalim. So if one makes a tent of either pishtan or tzemer wool or goat's hair or hide, oiros, they indeed are considered to be an oil with regard to tumas ohalim. Okay, so once again we have Exeris Shava, just as in the Mishkan there was no yotzim min ha'etz except for pishtan. Here too, regarding tumas ohalim, any yotzim min ha'etz is not suitable for tumas ohalim except for pishtan. Says the Gemara, if we're learning from Mishkan, let's go all the way. Imala halon shizurin. There is a requirement that the threads be spun v'chutun kafel shisha, and the threads need to be 6-fold. They need to be spun with 6 strands. Afkan shizurin v'chutun kafel vav. So to regarding tumas ohalim, perhaps we have the same requirement that the threads which comprise this material, which the tent is made of, is only going to be Metama to Masa'olim if it has the same specifications. It is properly spun, sixfold. Says the Gemara, no. Talmud Loimar, oil riba. The Torah tells us, the Torah repeats the word oil. In the parsha of Tumas HaHolim, the Torah repeats the word oil twice. It's come to be marbit to include, even if it doesn't fit exactly, precisely, the description and the specifications of the oil of the Mishkan. Says the Gemara, oil riba. If you have a riba, to include that as well, I feel called milinami. So why don't you include any type of material? Once you're including, include them all. So what is the Gzer Shava coming to teach us? Apparently Gzer Shava is teaching us that at least it must have the same material as found in the Mishkan. With regard to specifications and all kinds of details, okay, that is not required. That's why we have the riboy of oil. We don't need the shzurin and the chutin kafel shisha. Tosfos points out we don't either need the combination of tzemer pishtim, because the first level spread contained both. That's not required. So you don't need the details. As long as we have the same type of material, that is sufficient to be matama tumas haolam. Says the Gemara, the Ema, why not say as follows? Mala halan krushim, just like the Mishkan, the oil of the Mishkan consisted of not only the spread on top, it also had the krushim, the wooden beams which supported the spread. So both together made up the oil of Mishkan. If so, Afkan krushim. Here too, regarding Tumas HaHolim, even if you have a wooden oil, that should be considered an oil. Tosfos explains if you have the oil pishtan, the spread, the tent of pishtan, which is covering over, which is supported by krushim. So everything together, both elements make up the oil, whether it's the spread on top of pishtan, whether it's the krushim, the wooden supports. They're all considered to be part of the same oil, and everything, even the wood, should be makabel tumas olam. Just as we find that the Mishkan consisted of both elements, the spread on top, which was draped over and supported by the krushim. Says the Gemara, we find that the Torah says, make krushim for the Mishkan. Apparently, the krushim itself did not have the status of Mishkan, not have the status of oil. They were merely supporting and servicing the oil, and servicing the Mishkan. If so, regarding Tumas HaHolim as well, wood is not considered to be an oil with regard to Kabbalah's Tumas HaHolim. It says in one Mishkan Kari Mishkan. Anything that is considered Mishkan has the title of Mishkan, that is considered to be Mishkan. There's a girsa that says, Mishkan Kari oil, meaning that Mishkan is indeed part of the Mishkan. And Mishkan is synonymous with oil, as Rashi points out, that the pasuk connects the two words. The pasuk says it's Mishkan oil moed. So Mishkan has a din of oil. And Rashi says, for instance, the first layer, the first spread of the tzemer pishtim, that is called Mishkan. And that indeed has a din of oil, because Mishkan and oil are synonymous. However, the krushim, vein krushim kuri Mishkan. The krushim themselves are not considered Mishkan. As the pasuk says, Vasisa krushim la Mishkan. You're meant to make the krushim for the Mishkan, but the krushim themselves are not Mishkan. If so, krushim indeed are not considered to be a Mishkan or oil, and are not makabel tumas HaHolim. Therefore, the only yaitse min ha'etz that has tumas HaHolim is pishtan, but not merely pieces of wood. Says the Gemara El Mi'ata, if so, if you're going to make this diak of the lamed, vasisa krushim limishkan, let's make a similar diak elsewhere with regard to the second level of spreads on the Mishkan. So we had three levels. The lowest one was the tzemer pishtam, the woolen linen. On top of that came the goat's hair, and on top of that came the oiros, the hides. Says the Gemara, if we're going to make a diuk of asisa krushim la Mishkan to rule out the krushim, they're not considered to be Mishkan. So let's apply the same concept to the upper layer, to the third layer of the oiros, of the hides. They too are not oil. Why? Because the Torah says, "Vasisa michsel oil." We're meant to make a covering, which we're referring to the hide, the third level of covering, the third level of spread. We're meant to make the michsa, the covering, for the oil. What is the oil? That's the mid-level spread. That was the goats here. So apparently, the michsa all the way on top, made of hide, made of oil, is not oil. The pasuk says, "Vasisa michsa le-oil." It is covering the mid-level spread, which was the goats here. If so, are you going to conclude and suggest that the upper level spread is not oil? If that's the case, how are we going to understand the following Gemara? Rabbi Elazar asked the following question. So we know that, once again, any material found in the spreads of the Mishkan, in the tents of the Mishkan, are considered to have the status of oil, and with regard to Tumas Olim, they indeed are susceptible to that Tumah. So we already know Tzemer, we know Pishton, for they comprise the first layer. We know goats here, because that was the second layer. What about leather? What about hide? Is that considered to be a proper tent for Tumas Olim? So that was the upper level. Says the Gemara, Elazar asked the following question. What about hide from a non-kosher behemoth? Can it be considered to be an oil if one forms a tent out of the oil behemoth tmeya? Is it makabel to masahal? So that was his question. He seems to take for granted that oil behemoth tahira is an oil with regard to tumas halim. His question was only oil behemoth tmeya. And the Gemara soon will explain it's based on a question of what type of oil they used in the Mishkan. Okay, so that was his question. Says the Gemara, but you just told me that the upper level, the upper spread that consisted of oil is not oil, because the pasuk says "Vasisa michsa le-oil." That michsa, that covering, does not have a status of oil. Hashta oil beima tahira loy mitame. If the upper level, which consisted of oil beima tahira, is not mitame tumas halim, because it's not considered to be an oil, so all that was found in the Mishkan, the Torah rules it out. The Torah says it's not considered to be an oil. If so, oil beima tmeya, certainly the oil of a beima tmeya, which was not found or used in the Mishkan as a spread, mebaye, are you going to ask regarding that? Certainly, it's pashut, it's simple, it's self-evident that can't be an oil, because even if the oil that is found in the Mishkan is not an oil, certainly something which wasn't found in the Mishkan is not an oil. So what was the Elazar's question? Says Gemara, you're right, indeed, the upper level made of the hide was certainly an oil. Shani Hasam, it's different. The Hadar Hadrika, because over there the Torah restores it, Torah brings it back and gives it the status and title of oil. The Chsiv v'nasu esiriyas hamishkan, they carry the riyas, the sheets of the spreads of the Mishkan. So this is referring to the bottom spread of wool and linen, and then came the next layer, ves oil moed, which was the goats here. Michseu u'michseatachash asher olav. Here it's referring to the covering of the hide, and the Torah is connecting. The Torah joins the two together. We're meant to learn one from the other. Makish elyon l'tachta. We're meant to connect the upper layer, the third layer of hide, to the lower layer, to the layer of the goats here. Ma tachta in kori oil. Just as the goats here, the ureas izim, are considered to be oil, because the pasuk tells us clearly, Vayifar says oil ala mishkan, and the term oil is referring to, certainly the term oil is referring to the riyas izim, as we learned in this pasuk as well. V'nasas riyas mishkan ves oil mayed. So the word oil is referring to the riyas izim, to the mid-level spread. So just as that's considered to be an oil, af elyon, so to the upper layer, the upper level of hide, kori oil, is considered to be an oil. So although from the earlier pasuk of Asisa, michsa oil, it seems that the michsa, the hide covering, is not an oil. It's merely covering the oil. which is the mid-level covering, which is the Oiris, which is the Urias Izim. Nevertheless, we find another pasuk where the Torah restores it, gives it back its status, and puts it into the category of oil, because the Torah connects the upper layer with the mid layer. Just as the middle layer is considered an oil, the upper level of Oiris are considered to be an oil. So indeed, an oil, a tent which consists of hide, leather, has a status of oil, and with regard to Kabbalah's Tumah, it is Makabal Tumah Seholim. If so, we understand Rabbi Lezer's question. Rabbi Lezer wanted to know whether this concept applies only strictly to oiros from a behemoth Torah, or even oiros of a behemoth Tmei. So in summary, we learned about the concept of Tumah Seholim, that if a tent is made of material found in the Mishkan, this tent can be Makabal Tumah Seholim. If a mace is found underneath it, the oil becomes Tameh, even though it's Mechubar L'Karka. And what type of material is this oil made of? Any material that is found in the oil of the Mishkan. So we have three different levels on the Mishkan. We have the one of Tzemer Pishtan, which is called Mishkan. And as Rashi pointed out, that Mishkan and oil are synonymous. And therefore, that first level, that first spread has a status of oil. We learned that the second spread, the mid-level, was Urias Izim, made from the goat's hair, and that is specifically referred to as oil in the Torah. And we have oir, hide. If an oil is made of oir, it is also considered an oil, just as the upper layer, the upper spread of the Mishkan, which is the michse on top of the oil, and that too is considered to be an oil, because the Torah's makish connects the upper covering to the mid-level covering to the oil, and that too, the upper level, is considered an oil. So in conclusion, an oil which is made of the following materials can become Tameh Tumah Seholim, whether it's made from Tzemer Pishtan, willow linen, whether it is made from goat's hair, or made from hide. Now Rabbi Lezer wanted to know whether strictly Oiros of Behemoth Torah, or even Oiros Behemoth Tmeya, and that is the Gemara coming up. Go for what we just learned. By Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer inquired, Oir Behemoth Tmeya, Mao Shi Tameh Tumah Seholim. What about the hide of a Behemoth Tmeya, non-kosher behemoth? Says the Gemara, what is the basis, the background of this shaila? What are the two sides of the coin? What was this question? We know that the source of the concept of Tumah Seholim is the Mishkan. So he simply wanted to know, what was the Oiros in the Mishkan? What were they made of? Was it an Oir Behemoth Tahira or an Oir Behemoth Tmeya? Tachash, Shoy B'mei Moshe, this animal called Tachash, which was around in the days of Moshe, from which he used to make the Mishkan. He had a question. Was it a kosher animal or a non-kosher animal? Because the Torah tells us that the upper level covering was made of Oiros Elim Adam, the hide of Elim, of the rams, and Michse Oiros Tachashim, made from the hides of the Tachash. So Elim is rams, we know that's kosher. What about the Tachash? Was it a tar or a tameh? And that will form the basis of our derivation. We're going to learn from there. Whatever that was, meaning if that was a behemoth, if that was a kosher animal, then we know that oil of a behemoth tahira is considered to be an oil. But if the tachas is found to be a non-kosher animal, and the oil, the leather, the hide of that tachash is considered to be an oil, so we're going to carry that concept over to Tumah Seholim as well, and even the oil of a behemoth tmeya we consider to be an oil. So that was his question. Was it tachash? Was it tamei or tar? Omar Rav Yosef, my tiboyle. What's his question? How can he even suggest that tachash was a non-kosher animal? Tanina, we learned in the Bryce, the only thing suitable for heavenly service was only Ella Oir Behemoth Torah Bilvad. We can only use the hide of a Behemoth Torah. So certainly the Tachash must have been a kosher animal. Moshe Rav Abba challenged this assertion. We have a Brayta which says, Rabbi Daimer, Shnei Mechsoyis Hayu. So you know there was an upper level made of hide. The Torah says it's made of Oires Elim Adamim, Basisa Michsel oil, Oiris elim adamim, umichse oiris tchashim elamala. So how do we interpret this pasuk? Is the Torah referring to two types of coverings? One made of the oiris elim and one made of the oiris tchashim. There were two separate layers. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Shnei michsayis hayu. There were two layers up on that third level. Echad shel oiris elim adamim. One made of the hides of the rams. Vechad shel oiris tchashim. One made of the hides of the tachash. No, it was actually one layer. Michse echad hayu was one layer. Rashi says it was half and half. Half made of the hide of the rams and half from the tachash. And Rechema continues to describe this whole thing. V'doimek min talailan. The tachash appeared like the animal, the cat-like animal of a talailan, which hangs on a tree. And that was a tachash. Says the Gemara, if tachash was like the talailan, v'talailan tamehu, this was a non-kosher species. If so, we see that a tachash was not a kosher animal. Says Gemara, no, he's not referring to the actual tachash. He's not saying that the tachash was actually the same species as talailan, which is tameh. Hachikamar, kimin talailanhu. It appeared like it had the same design. It was spotted, it was freckled, it was speckled. It was multicolored like the talailan. Sheesh b'gvanan harbe, that has many colors. But certainly v'loy talailan, it wasn't the same species as talailan. Dilu hasam tameh, because talailan is a non-kosher animal, v'chator. But the tachash was a Torah animal. If so, now we understand the Targum. On the word tachash, the Targum uses the word, the translation in Aramaic, with the word sasgoina. Now, why doesn't he simply say talailan, which would be the proper Aramaic translation of tachash, were it a talailan? So apparently, it is not a talailan, and therefore the Targum uses the word sasgoina, which means shesas b'gvanan harbe, that it is happy, is glad, it seems to be proud about all its colors that it's displaying. So indeed, the tachash was not the talailan, but rather could very well have been a kosher animal. Very nice pshat I saw from the Sefer Chanukas HaTorah. Why does the Targum here specifically give it a Targum which describes its behavior? Shesas v'gvanan harbe, sasgoina. It's happy and proud to display its color. It's happy about its colors. Why didn't he simply just say a tachash? So the Sefer Chanukas HaTorah says that we know that all the names of the animals were given by Adam Arishan. Hashem instructed him to give the names to the animals. Now the tachash was not around in the time of Adam Rishon, as we will learn later in the Gemara. It appeared specifically in the time of the Mishkan for use of building the Mishkan. So says the Chanukas HaTorah, since it wasn't around in the time of Adam Rishon, it didn't really have an original name. Therefore, the Targum need to give it a name which simply described its behavior. Tachash is a sasgoina. It is happy on account of its multicolored appearance. Because the Targum needed to give it a name that simply described its behavior, since it doesn't really have an original name from the time of Adam Rishon. Okay, so we're left with the question of Rabbi Lezer. What about the hide, the oil of a behemoth tmeya? Is it considered to be an oil? And can it be mekabel tumas oyalim? Why? This is based on the question of what was the tachash used in the Mishkan. Was it a Torah animal or a non-Torah animal? Says the Gemara, Rava Amar, I'll bring you a proof that even oil behemoth tmeya can become tameh tumas olam. Rava Amar, oil behemoth tmeya de metama ba'oil hameis mihacha. From here, the Sani was learned in the Brayso. Oil, this is the pasuk by Tumas Negoim. It should have merely said oil leather. Why does it say oy bi'ar with a base? It's coming to you marbet to include something. Riba oy be'metmeya. Even the hide of a non-kosher behema can become tameh with a nega if a nega is present on it. That's one thing we learn from this riboy. What else do we learn? Another halacha of shalaki bi'at kohen. If the nega appeared when the item was in the possession, was in the hands of the kohen, so it wasn't there before and then brought to the kohen. It appeared when it was in the hands of the kohen. This too constitutes a nega. Why would I think otherwise? Explains Tosfos, because the pasuk tells us that the beged, which contained the nega, and was shown to the kohen. So it's mashma, it appears that the nega needs to be there before it's presented to the kohen. Therefore, we need a special ribui to teach us, no, even if the nega surfaced after the kohen was holding on to it, that is considered to be a nega and is tamid. What else we learn, says the Braisa, kotzas mikulan, v'asa achas mehen. So the Torah, the pasuk, describes a variety of materials which are tamid tumas negoyim, like the shasi ve'erev, the threads, like the tzemer, the pishtim, hide. So any of these items can become tamid tumas negoyim. What if one takes a piece of each and joins them together into an item? Does that become tumas negoyim? Or do we need each one separately? Kotzas mikulan v'asa achas mehen menayin. How do we know that too can become tummy with a negative? This teaches us that even this formation can be makabel tumas negoyim. So indeed we have a makar, says Rava, that even an of a behemoth tmeya can become tummy tumas negoyim, and therefore the same thing will apply to tumas ha'olam of meis. Says, well, 1 second, not so fast. We can refute this. We can find a chiluk. We can differentiate between tumas negoyim and tumas meis. Perhaps this halacha only applies to tumas negoyim. Perhaps it's more stringent tumas meis in some element, in some form. Ikal mifrach, says the Marmal negoyim. We find a stringency. Sheken shesi ve'erev tamid. Even merely threads can become tamid tumas negoyim. That's unique to negoyim that we don't find by tumas meis. Taisus brings a Gemara which teaches us that by mace, only a piece of material can become tamei, but not merely threads. So this is a unique stringency chumrah for negoyim, which is not found by mace. So you can't learn mace from negoyim. Perhaps this din of oir behemoth tmeya, which is tamei by negoyim, will not apply to tumas mace. Ella rather, says the Gemara, we have another source. We'll learn it from the halacha of tumas sheretz. The Sani, as we learned, oir. So if a hide touches a sheretz, it becomes tummy. Only ala oir behemoth Torah. So we only will know about oir behemoth Torah. What about oir behemoth tmeya minayin? What about the hide from a behemoth tmeya? How do we know that too can become tummy when it touches sheretz? Tamad loymar oir. So the added word oir is coming to include even oir behemoth tmeya. So we have a makar for this concept of oir behemoth tmeya becoming tummy. And let's carry that over to tumas meis as well, to tumas olam as well. Says Gemara once again, Vikal Mifrach, we can refute this raya. Perhaps mal shrotzim shecame mitaman kadasha. Perhaps tumas sheretz is more stringent than tumas meis in a certain aspect, because we find the chumrah of kadasha. A sheretz is mitama even if we only have a small piece the size of a lentil. So that's a chumrah that we don't find by meis, and meis requires a kazayis. So we can't learn a din from shrotzim to meis. Says the Gemara, negoyim yachichu. Negoyim will disprove this factor. Meaning, you're suggesting that why is a sheretz metame a non-kosher or an oir from metmeya? Because shrotzim have a chumrah of kadasha. So apparently adasha forms the basis of this halacha of oir metmeya. But that will be disproven from Negoyim, because Negoyim doesn't have that element. Negoyim is not Matame Kadasha. Negoyim needs the size of a gris, which is the area of 9 lentils. So the nega needs to be the size of 9 lentils. It doesn't have the din of Kadasha. Nevertheless, we find that a nega can be Matame even Oir behemoth tmeya. So you can't say that the element of Adasha is the reason, is the catalyst for the tumah of Oir behemoth tmeya. Negoyim will disprove that. The chazra din, but the din, the logic, will shift back. Meaning, so you say, okay, negoyim apparently doesn't have this chumrah of adasha, so you can't say adasha is the reason for the tumah of oir behemoth tmeya. Okay, let's shift over to negoyim. So negoyim is metame oir behemoth tmeya, but 1 second, negoyim has another chumrah, which is it's metame even threads, shasi ve'erev. So perhaps that is the catalyst. That is the basis for the din of oir behemoth tmeya, and that can't be brought over to tumas meis because tumas meis doesn't have that chumrah. So let's go back and forth from shrotzim to negoyim. Apparently, the element factor found in one, which appears to form the basis and the catalyst for the tumah of the Orbei Matmei, is not found in the other one. Is not the reason, not the catalyst found in the other one. And the factor which apparently forms the basis of the tumah of Orbei Matmei in the other one, doesn't form the basis for the tumah in the other item. Meaning, we're going to go back and forth from sheretz to negoyim, from negoyim to sheretz. Each one has a unique element which appears to perhaps be the basis, to be the catalyst of this halacha, that it's matama even the oyer of emetmeya. But that element is not found in the other parasha. But in the other parasha we find a different element which is unique. Perhaps that forms the basis. But that can't form the basis because we find in the other parasha that element is not present. And nevertheless, the halacha still applies. So apparently we must say that none of these elements indeed form the basis and are the cause for this tumah of Orbei Matmeya, because it's inconsistent. We must find one factor that is common to both. We must find a common denominator from shratzim and negoyim. What is the common denominator? She'or tameh behem. They both have the same halacha, negoyim and shratzim, that a piece of a piece of hide leather, will become tameh, whether through a nega, whether through a sheretz. So since they have that halacha, that concept, that is tameh, and we find that based on that, the Torah actually joins together different types of hide. The Torah says that Orbei Matmeya has the same status, same halacha as Orbei Matmeya. So that capsulizes the halacha of negoyim and shratzim as well. They both have one common denominator, that is tameh, and what type of regardless of what type, whether Torah or tameh. If so, afani avi. Now we can apply this. We can bring into this equation oil ames, the oil of ames, she'or tameh, that we know that an oil, a tenth of a mace, made of hide, has a status of oil mace, will become tameh to masalim, as we learned from Mishkan. If so, if it has that basic element that oil is tameh, let's apply the entire concept of v'nasaboy oibei matmei oibei matayra. If so, let's make the din of Orbei Matmeya akin to Orbei Matayra. So once again, we have a common denominator between shratzim and negoyim. They both are matami or, and therefore, regardless of what type of or, is tamei, whether it's Torah or tamei. Similarly, regarding tumas oil of mace, since we find that it also has that common denominator, that or is tamei, if so, we'll apply it all the way, regardless of what type of or, Orbei Matayra or Orbei Matmeya. So this is a matzat. Says the Gemara, 1 second. We still can't learn oil maze from the common denominator found by shratzim and negoyim. Why? Because there's another thing found commonly to those two that is not found by mace. We can disrupt this. We can dispute this. There is something in common. There's a common denominator between negoyim and shratzim. Shekain tmeim and pachas v'kazayis. They both are tamei even when they have less than a kazayis. A nega is matame, even a gris, which is less than a kazayis. A sheretz is matame, even kadosha, which is certainly less than a kazayis. Toimer v'meis sheina matame lo kazayis. Mace is only matame if it has the measure, the share of kazayis. So mace, in order for it to be matame, it needs a larger share, much greater share. That is a kula, a leniency present in mace that is not present in either in negoyim nor in shratzim. So we can't derive mace from there, because the tzalashava will be that negoyim and shratzim are both matame in a much smaller measure, much smaller share. They have a stringency that mace doesn't have. So it's logical to say that the stringency that is found by them regarding Orbei Matmeya is unique to them and cannot be applied to mace. If so, we can't learn from there. Ela Marava will have a different source to apply the halacha of Tumas Ha'olam to Orbei Matmeya. Ela Marava mebarnish Asiyam b'kavachaymer. We'll learn it from a kavachaymer. From where? Minoytz shalizim. From the hair of the goats here, which was the second level spread of the Mishkan. And we know that's considered to be an oil. And will have Tumas Seholim. So what is the Kal V'chomer? Says the Gemara, if we find that by Neitzer Shalizim, She'em Matama B'Negoyim, the Tumas Negoyim won't apply there, because the Torah, when it lists the various materials that have Tumas Negoyim, it doesn't have this material amongst them. It doesn't have the Neitzer Shalizim, the goats here. So since we find the Neitzer Shalizim, although it doesn't have Tumas Negoyim, nevertheless Matama Ba'oil, it certainly is Matama Tumas Seholim, because it's found in the Mishkan. Matama Ba'oil HaMeis. Oir Be'matmeya Shematama B'Negoyim, certainly Oir Be'matmeya, which is Matama B'Negoyim, as we just learned earlier. The Torah specifically includes Oir Be'matmeya regarding Negoyim, so it has that Chumrah. Certainly Ein Din Shematama Ba'oil HaMeis. Of course, will become Tamei in Oil HaMeis, and Tumas Seholim will be applied to hide, to Oir even of a Behemoth Tmeya. So in summary, we were trying to learn the halacha of Tumas Seholim with regard to Oir Behemoth Tmeya. So we know that Oir Behemoth Tahira certainly has Tumas Seholim, because that was found in the Mishkan. What about the Oir Behemoth Tmeya? We weren't sure if that was found in the Mishkan. So does Tumas Seholim apply there? So we had a few attempts at finding the source. We began with learning from the Goyim, just as the Oir Behemoth Tmeya will become Tamei there, perhaps regarding Oil HaMeis as well. Says the Gemara, no, we can't learn from there, because Nega is unique. It has a stringency that even the Shesi V'Erev, even the mere threads become Tamei. That's a Chumrah exclusive to Nega, not found by Oil HaMeis, so we can't learn from there. The Gemara proceeded to attempt to learn from Shratzim. To Sheretz applies even to Oir Behemoth Tmeya. Says the Gemara, no, we can't learn from there either, because Sheretz is unique. That has a Chumrah that is Tamei Ba'adasha, which is a very small shear. It's a Chumrah. Whereas Mace needs a Kazayas. The Gemara proceeded with a Tzad Shava. Let's just make a common denominator between the two. We find that Negam Shratzim are Matame Oir, and are Matame even Oir Behemoth Tmeya. So too, Tumas Seholim, says the Gemara, no. But they have an element in common which is not applicable to Tumas Mace. What is that? They are both Matame less than a Kazayas. So they're more stringent than Mace. Finally, says the Gemara, we'll learn from a Kal V'chomer, from Yeriya Isizim, from the spread, the covering of the goats here, which was used in the Mishkan. And the Kal V'chomer is, if the goats here, although it's not Matame B'Negoyim, it can be Tamei B'Oil HaMeis. Certainly the Oir Behemoth Tmeya, which is Matame B'Negoyim, certainly it will become Tamei B'Oil HaMeis. That's the conclusion of the Gemara. Is Oir Behemoth Tmeya hides from a non-kosher animal, considered to be an oil with regard to Tumas Seholim? Yes, indeed, and we learn it from a Kal V'chomer. If so, says the Gemara, Ve'ela, how the Tanur of Yosef, how are we going to understand what Rav Yosef taught us? He quoted the Brayta which said, Lo Yehuchshru b'Melech HaShamayim Ela Oir Behemoth Torah B'Levad, that for Melech HaShamayim, for heavenly service, for spiritual service, we can only use the Oir Behemoth Torah. We can't use the Oir Behemoth Tmeya. L'may Hilchasa, what halachic lesson was he teaching us? Because initially we figured that Rav Yosef is coming to teach us a very great halach, that the Mishkan consisted only of Oir Behemoth Torah, and the Tachash in the Mishkan was made from Oir Behemoth Torah, and therefore, with regard to Tumas Seholim as well, which is learned from the Oil Mishkan, it will only apply to hide from a Behemoth Torah, to Oir's Behemoth Torah. So initially we figured that was Rav Yosef's lesson, that was what he's coming to teach us. But now that we've concluded that even Oir's Behemoth Tmeya has the din of oil, we learned it from Kal V'chomer. If so, let's get back to Rav Yosef. What is he coming to teach us? When he tells us that for the Mishkan, for Melech HaShamayim, we can only use, for heavenly service, we can only use the Oir Behemoth Torah. Evidently, he's not coming to teach us a halacha regarding Tumas Seholim, because that is not so. For Tumas Seholim, even Oir Behemoth Tmeya is suitable. Was he coming to teach us that the Oir used in the Mishkan was Oir Behemoth Torah? What's the point in him teaching us that? As Rashi says, "My da'avahava." Whatever happened, happened. It was merely a historical fact of the past. Yosef appears to be coming to teach us something, some halachic lesson. Well, what is he coming to teach us? Says the Gemara, he's not coming to teach us anything with regards to Mishkan, but rather Litzfilin. He's coming to teach us a halacha that pertains to tefillin. So Melechas Shamayim is not concerning the Mishkan, but rather the making of the tefillin. That the tefillin must be made from oir of behema to hoira, and not the oir of behema to meir. Says what tefillin? That's what he's coming to teach us. Behedik sivu. The pasuk explicitly tells us that already. We don't need Rav Yosef's brisa. What is the pasuk? L'man tiyater Hashem beficha. Hashem's Torah should be in your mouth, and we make a drasha min amutar beficha. You must write the Torah only on parchment, which is edible, which is permissible, which comes from a kosher animal. So we already have a source for this halacha. Apparently Rav Yosef is not coming to teach us that. Elo, says the Gemara, he's coming to teach us another halacha with regard to tefillin. Not that the parshas, not that the words of the Torah, of tefillin, need to be written on parchment of Erbem Torah, but rather he's speaking about the housing, the bottom, Elo la'oiron, that too needs to be from Erbem Torah, although words of Torah are not written on them. So it can be learned from the pasuk of Laman Tir Torah Hashem Beficha. They don't contain Torah. It's merely the housing of the parashas. That's what Jesus is coming to teach us. That the housing, the bottom, need to be made from Erbem Torah. Says the Gemara, that also we know from elsewhere. Didn't Abaye teach us? Shin Shen Tefillin, Halacha Moshe Sinai. The shin that is formed on the housing and the bias of the tefillin, that is learned from Halacha Moshe Sinai. And since the letter of Hashem, because the shin is the first letter of Shakai, since that is present on the bias, so that is Teres Hashem, and that certainly needs to be made from beficha, from material which is permissible, which is edible, which is Behema Torah. So once again, we have an alternate source. We don't need Rav Yosef for that. Ella, says the Gemara, is coming to teach another element of tefillin. L'karcham is sa'aron. We're meant to wrap the parshas of tefillin with their type of hair, meaning the hair coming from the same type of animal that the cloth comes from, which is the Behema Torah. That's number one. Ulatoy from the Giddim. We're meant to sew the housing, the bottom, with sinews, with Giddim from their type, meaning from a Behema Torah. So that's Rav Yosef's Chiddush. Says this too is learned from Halacha Moshe Sinai. The Sanas we learned tefillin merubais, the fact that the bottom need to be squared. Halacha Moshe Sinai. The churachos b'sa'ar, the parts are meant to be wrapped with their hair. When it first begidan, and the bottom meant to be sewn with their giddim. So we don't need Rav Yosef's halacha for that. Says the Gemara Elul Ritzuis. He's coming to teach us regarding the Ritzuis, the straps of tefillin, that they need to come from a Behema Torah. Says the Gemara, that too is Halacha Moshe Sinai. The fact that the choice need to be black, that is Halacha Moshe Sinai. The Gemara presumes at this point that any halachas pertaining to Ritzuis is learned from Halacha Moshe Sinai, including the halacha that the Ritzuis need to come from a Behema Torah. Says the Gemara, no. Certainly we learn from Halacha Moshe Sinai regarding their color. Torahs make Gemiri. Do we learn that they need to come from a Behema Torah? That we don't learn from Halacha Moshe Sinai, and that indeed is taught by Rav Yosef in the Brisa, when he quotes the Brisa, referring to the Ritzuis, the straps of tefillin, they must be made from Ma'or Behema Torah. So in summary, we learn some halachas regarding tefillin, that it needs to come from Ma'or Behema Torah, from something which is edible, it can't come from an animal which is not Torah. So the parshas need to be written on Erbem Torah, and that is learned from the pasuk Laman Tir Torah Hashem Beficha. The Torah Hashem need to be written, recorded on cloth, which is mutar beficha, something permissible, something Torah. What about the bias, the housing of the parshas? That's Halacha Moshe Sinai. What about the wrapping, the sa'aros that we wrap the parshas with, or the gid and the sinews that we use to sew the bottom? How do we know that comes from a Torah animal? That's Halacha Moshe Sinai. Finally, Ritzuis, the fact that they're black, that's Halacha Moshe Sinai. The fact that they come from a kosher animal, that is learned with Rav Yosef's Brisa of Lehuchshu, L'melech Shamayim, Ela, Or Behema Torah Bavad. Continues the Gemara, My Havela. So, in fact, what happened to the Tachash? What was the conclusion? Is it a Behema Torah? Is it a kosher animal or a non-kosher animal? My Havila the Tachash Hayi b'Moshe. So the Farshim ask, but didn't we just say that the Gemara won't involve himself in a mere historical fact? It's my davahava. It's a past fact. Who cares? So the Farshim say that indeed we won't initiate a discussion regarding a past historical fact, but once we've begun discussing it, we're meant to conclude it. My havila the tachash Moshe. So indeed, was the tachash a kosher or non-kosher animal? Amar Rala, Amar Shmuel Lakish. Oyuer Rameir. Rameir would say as follows: Tachash Moshe, Bria b'fnei Asma. It was a unique creature. It was a Bria b'fnei Asma. It was a unique species. V'lo yichriu b'chachamim. The chachamim couldn't determine im min chayu im behemu. If it was a behemu or a chaya. V'keren achas lemitzcha. It had one horn. It was like a unicorn. Well, if he's shown as dameling Moshe, and for that time it was made available to Moshe, v'asum and a mishkan, and he used it for the mishkan v'nignas, and after he used it, it was hidden from civilization. Says the Gemara. Okay, so we have the description of the tachash. It had one horn. Says the Gemara, since it had one horn, shma bino Torah. Apparently, this was a behemoth Torah. Why? The Amar of Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda told us that. One second. So the Gemara will first bring a raya from the fact that I had a keren. Why is that a raya? Says Tosis Anita, that itself is a raya. From the fact that it had a horn, a keren, b'mitzchay, in its forehead, it came out someplace by its forehead. So that was an indication that it was a Torah animal. Why? Because the Mishnah tells us that any animal that has a horn, it is a raya that it has split hooves, and indeed it is a kosher animal. So this itself is a raya that it was a kosher animal. We don't know if it was a chaya behema, but we certainly know that it was a kosher animal. So that's the first raya. Once again, this is an indication that Torah was Torah. Continues the Gemara. But perhaps this principle, this klal, this rule of the Mishnah, that anything that has a horn is considered to be a kosher animal, that perhaps that only applies to an animal that has two horns, which is the norm. How do we know that even one horn is a siman tahara? So for that we'll bring another right. Domar B'Yehuda, sure, the bull that Hikriv Adam Rishon, that Adam Rishon brought as a carbon, it also had one horn. Karen Achas Haisla Mitzcha, it had one horn. Shenema Matitav, Vesitav Hashem Misharpar, my praise to Hashem will be better than the Sharpar Makrin Mafris, that was horned and hoofed. Says the Gemara, this was the animal that Adam Rishon brought as a carbon, and he had one horn, and the fact that he brought it as a carbon, apparently it was a behemoth Torah, it was a kosher animal. So this indeed is a raya, that even if it only has one horn, one keren, it is a kosher animal. Rav Moshe Feinstein learns a little different. He says that was the first shor in the world, and all other shvarim, the other bulls, oxen that came later, were descendants of this first sharpar. So apparently, if all the other shvarim that are around today are considered to be Torah animals, so obviously the father sharpar or the mother sharpar was considered to be a kosher animal. So this indeed is the raya that the shor of Adam Rishon was a behemoth Torah. So 1 second, how can you say that the shor only had one keren because it says makron mafris? Makron tarti mashma. Makron is a plural term. It had two horns. Indeed, you read it as makron with the chirik, but if you look at the pasuk, it doesn't have the yud. So the ksiv, it can be read as makran, which is a singular term, so it only contained one keren. So once again, we had a shayla. What about the tachash? Was it Torah tameh? The Gemara says indeed it's Torah because it had a horn, and a horn, a keren, is indicative of its tahara. Even one horn, as we find by Adam Rishon. Says Gemara, if so, why don't we conclude all the way? Let's bring a raya. If this tachash was the same as, similar to the shor of Adam Rishon, which was a behema, was a shor, was a ox, a bull. If so, let's bring a raya that the tachash was a behema as well. Bin behemu. Says Zimar, no, because we find a phenomenon that even a chaya can have one horn. Even the keresh, there's this type of chaya called a keresh, which is a chaya, not a behema. V'lesla l'chad keren only has one horn. So ikil so therefore here too as well by the tachash ikil and chayu. It too was a chaya. So this phenomenon of the one-horned behema is not only unique to behema, exclusive to behema. We find that even a certain type of animal has one horn. This animal called keresh. So perhaps the tachash was an animal as well, even though it had one horn. Okay, so what's the conclusion? The tachash in the time of Moshe was indeed a tar animal. However, we're not sure whether it was a behema or a chaya. Continues the Mishnah. Psilas habeged shekipla. If one forms a wick by rolling up the beged, a piece of material, he rolled it up into a wick. Psilas habeged shekipla. So he rolled it up into a wick. But he didn't scorch it, he didn't singe it, he didn't burn it. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Tmei, this is still considered to be a beged. This material, even though it was formed into a wick, it still constitutes a shem beged and can be mekabel tumah. So since he merely rolled it, but lo yivhava, he didn't char it yet, it still has the status of a beged and it can be mekabel tumah. But it cannot be used, it cannot light with it. The Gemara soon will explain the reason for this. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ta'iri, this wick is tar. Once you roll the material into a wick form, its status of beged is negated. It is batal and is not considered to be a beged for Kabbalah's tumah. And one may light this wick. Explains the Gemara. So we have two disputes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Lezer and Akiva. One regarding tumah, whether this wick is makabel tumah, and one regarding the allowance to light it. Explains the Gemara. Bishleima lini tumah. We understand the machlekes regarding tumah. Ba'apligi. The machlekes is based on the following reasoning. Rabbi Lezer savar kipul and emayil, merely folding and rolling it doesn't affect its status. Ubemilsa kaima, it's still considered to be a beged, and therefore it's makabel tumah. Ubemilsa kamaisa kaima, its initial status is still retained. Rabbi Kiva savar kivu mayil, folding it, rolling it affects the halachic status of the material. Ubetuli batal, and the initial status of beged becomes totally negated and is considered to be tar with regard to tumah. So we understand that machlekes. Elalini hatlaka, but my pligi. How do we understand this machlekes? Whether or not you're allowed to light it? But my pligi, what is this based on? Amar Blazer and Veisha, v'chein Amar Adar Ava. This will be explained by presenting 4 premises. It is based on 4 facts. Number 1, Hacha, the case in the Mishnah, is speaking about begimal gimel mitzamais askin. We're speaking about a piece of material, a very small patch, the size of precisely 3 etzbais width by 3 etzbais. So it's a very small piece of material, which is the minimum shear for a beged to mekabel tumah. So that's the type of material which you rolled into a wick. So that's number 1 premise. Number 2 fact we need to know is we're speaking about lighting the wick on Erev Shabbos, where Yontif fell on that day. So it's Yontif. That's number 2. Number 3, we need to know, the Kuli Alma all agree, the Kuli Alma Isla Rav Yehuda, they all agree, they all concur with the Shita Rav Yehuda, who says, the Amar, Masikim Bekalim. On Yontif, one may use utensils, kalim, for fuel. But one may not use a kli that became broken on Yontif. Why? Explains Rashi, it's muktzah. Because when a kli breaks on Yontif, it's as though it became created anew. It got a new identity. It assumed a new function. And therefore, this new entity, since it was unanticipated on Erev Yontif, and it was designated to be used as a utensil, as a kli, not as fuel for the fire. So it's considered to be like a noilad, like it was born today, like it was created anew, and it's considered to be muktzah. One may not use it or use it as fuel. If so, says the Gemara, this is something that they all agree. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva both agree to this halacha, that one may use kalim, but not shivrei kalim, since they are muktzah, because they came into existence today. They're muktzah. The 4th thing we need to know with the kulam is l'dula. They all agree. They all agree to the halacha of Ula, Damar Ula, with regard to lighting Ner Shabbos. Hamadlik, one who lights in Ner Shabbos, he must keep the flame there. You can't simply light a bit and pull away. It needs to stay there. He needs to light most of the wick that is protruding from the oil to ensure that the flame is developed enough to the point that it can rise and can sustain itself. So that is the halacha of ula. So once again, we have 4 premises. Number 1, we're speaking about a small size material, exactly a sheer beged, 3 by 3 etzbos. Number 2, we're speaking about it's yontif. Number 3, we agree that if a kli breaks on yontif, we may not use it for fuel. Number 4, there is an obligation to keep the flame, to keep lighting until the roiv hayotze of the wick gets ignited. If so, says the Gemara, this will form the background, the basis for the machlokes in the Mishnah. Can we light this wick on yontif? Says the Gemara of Lezer Savar, kipul einim oil. Merely rolling this material into a wick, it doesn't affect its status. It's still considered to be a beged, as we said earlier. If so, we can't light it on Yom Tov. We give it the aligbe purta, because once he begins to light it, by doing so he diminishes the shear just a little bit. It gets a little burnt, and now it's no more 3 by 3 etzbos. It's no more considered a beged. Havle shever kli. It's like a broken kli. If so, when he continues, when he carries on, he stands there, continues lighting it until the roiv hayotze gets ignited. What is he doing? He's being madlik a broken kli, something which is not a beged anymore, which became a shever kli on yontif. Because once again, when he began the lighting process, it was a kli. It was 3 by 3 etzbos. But as soon as he burnt a bit, it became diminished. And it loses the status of kli of beged. It is a shever kli. It assumes a new identity. It has a new existence. It's a shever kli. It's noilad. It's muktzah. So you can't carry on the lighting process. You can't keep on standing until the roiv hayotze is ignited, because he's not allowed to keep on burning the shever kli. If so, says Rabbi Lezer, you can't light it on Yom Tov. Rabbi Kiva Savar, Kiva Moil. Rabbi Kiva holds that simply rolling this piece of material affects its status. It's not considered to be a beged anymore. It's a wick. So when he rolls it on Erev Yom Tov, he negates its beged status. It's not a beged anymore. It's a wick. Ve'iter is kli olav. It doesn't have the halach of a kli. If so, it's totally permissible. Why can't he take the flame and light this wick? This wick is not a kli. It's like a piece of wood. If so, it's mutter to light it on Yom Tov. So in summary, the Mishnah taught us a machlokes between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva. We have 2 disputes here. And the Gemara explains, number 1, they were arguing whether the psila of a beged, which is the material which was rolled into a psila, according to Rabbi Lezer, it is still considered to be a beged. It's makabel tumah. According to Rabbi Kiva, it's no beged anymore, because rolling it into a wick is mevatel, negates its beged status, is merely considered like a piece of wood. If so, says the Gemara, what falls out from this machlokes is another machlokes regarding lighting it on Yom Tov. We're speaking about a patch which is exactly sholosh etzbos, the minimum amount for a beged. According to Rabbi Lezer, one may not light it on Yom Tov, because when he begins lighting it, he diminishes its size. It becomes shivrei kelim, it's muktzah. According to Rabbi Kiva, one may light it on Yom Tov, because when he already rolled it on Erev Yom Tov, it lost its shem beged. It became like a piece of wood. So why can't he light it on Yom Tov? It's perfectly allowed. Okay, time for a quick chazar on today's daf. We began the concept of tumas holim. So a tent made of certain types of materials, which are hovering over a mace, will become tamei tumas holim. We learn it from Mishkan. Any material found in the oil of Mishkan is considered to be an oil in this regard. The Mishkan had 3 levels. The first layer was tzemer pishtim, that is called Mishkan. The next level was Urias Izim, the goat's hair, that was considered to be oil, and the upper level was made of the hide, and that too is considered to be oil, although the Torah refers to it as michzeh, but the Torah considers michzeh like oil. Therefore, what we conclude from here, that a tent made of any of these materials, whether tzemer, pishtim, Urias Izim, and or, are considered to be an oil with regard to tumas oil. Now we know oil be'emet tahira is considered to be an oil in this regard. What about oil be'emet tameya? The Gemara wants to learn from the Goyim. The Gemara says we can't. The Goyim have a chumrah of shasi ve'erev is tamei. We want to learn from shvatzim. So the Gemara, we can't learn from there either, because there is a chumrah there that's metame kadasha, and these chumras are not found by oil hameis. We want to learn from both of them together. The Gemara says they have a common denominator. They are metame less than a kazayis, which is a chumrah not found by mace, makes needs a kazais. And finally, the Gemara says we'll learn from a Kalachomer that goats here is metame be'oil. Certainly, the Urbe Metameya is metame be'oil. The Gemara taught us some halachos regarding tefillin. It needs to be made from Urbe Metaira. The Parshis, the Batim, the Sa'aris and the Gidim and the Ritzuris as well. Finally, we learned regarding a wick made from a beged. According to Belezer, it is a beged. According to Rekiva, it's not. According to Belezer, one may not light it on Yom Tov. According to Rekiva, one may light it on Yom Tov.